Hi, this is Mike from BandLab, and in this video, we're going to make a piano pop beat in BandLab's free online DAW. You can open this project yourself with the link in the video description. And if you find this guide useful, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be the first to know when new videos drop. I begin by setting the project tempo to 125 beats per minute, and the project key to G major. Piano pop tracks combine pop and dance music arrangements and are beat-driven, so before I compose the piano part, I'm going to build a beat from samples. I open BandLab's Sounds and click the Loops tab and enter House into the text search field. I set the instrument filter to Beats. House Clicker 2 is a solid kick loop, so I drag that into the project. I turn the track's volume down to -4 dB, so I have headroom in the mix to add other elements. Chicago House Drums 03 is just hats and claps, and this will complement the kick loop perfectly. I drag it into the project and set the track to -6 dB. The beat so far is solid, but it could do with some more flavor. I like the sound of bassline House Beats 02, so I drag that into the project too. This loop is 2 bars in length, so I loop it out for the rest of the 4-bar sequence using the loop handle at the top right-hand corner. This loop has kicks in it, but I don't want these to interfere with the existing kicks. So in the effects panel, I add a tone multi-filter, set its mode to high pass, and set the filter to 1250 Hz. I turn this track down to -3 dB. Now it's time to add that all-important piano. I create a new virtual instrument track and set it to Keyboards, Pianos, Studio Grand. This instrument is quite loud, so I turn the track's volume down to -10 dB. I want this piano part to be rich and emotionally involving, so I'm going to use some slightly more complex chords. I begin with a G major, followed by an A major. Then I use an E major 7 with a suspended second. This sounds complex, but it's basically just a B major with an E in the bass. Then it's an E6 chord with a suspended second, which is basically a B suspended with an E in the bass. The second time around, the part plays G major and A major like before, but this time it follows it up with an E major in the first inversion with a G sharp in the bass. The last chord is a G major 7. These chords have the bittersweet feel I'm after, but I'd like them to sound more polished and glossy. In the effects panel, I add a modulation dimension B. This is a pretty subtle chorus effect, but I don't want to overdo it. Next, I add a reverb, studio reverb. I set the mix to 1.8 and the size to 0.7. To make things more rhythmically interesting, I add a delay filter echo, setting the mix to 20% and the delay to 223 milliseconds. I then add a Dynamics BL1176 compressor to bring up that part's average volume level. We're now compressing the tail of the delay effect, making it louder. This might not be to your taste, and you can experiment by putting the delay after the compressor by dragging it in the effects chain. This sounds more open and natural, but I really like the tight feel of the compressed version, so I moved the delay back to where it was. This piano now sounds more upfront, and I'm ready to add some more instruments. I add a new instrument track and select keyboards, synth keys, clean fifth sine organ. I turn this track down to -5 dB. This part follows the root note of the chords, apart from it using the piano's bass notes for the final two chords. Now I need a bass line. I add an instrument track and set it to basses, synth basses, deep house. I set this track to -6 dB and duplicate over the MIDI clip from the organ track. To duplicate clips or notes in BandLab, hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows, then drag them over. I want the bass part to play an octave lower, so I press Option plus A or Alt plus A to select all the notes in the clip, then click the -12 button to transpose them down an octave. I'm very happy with what I've got so far, but I'd like to add some other instruments to help keep the arrangement feel interesting. I add an instrument track and set it to strings, string orchestra stack. I turn this track down to -10 dB. For the MIDI, I used the same keys as the organ and bass parts, but played with a perfect fifth between the beats. I add a modulation stereo chorus effect, setting the depth to 45%. I then add a filter echo with a mix of 24% and a delay of 207 milliseconds. I add another instrument track and set this one to strings, string orchestra. I turn the track down to -11 dB. This part is very simple and plays a G, followed by a G an octave up. I add a studio reverb to this part to make it sound more natural. I'm also going to add a sound effect to help with the transitions in the arrangement. In BandLab's Sounds, I clear the instrument filter and enter riser into the text search field. I drag speeding riser into the project. I turn this track down to -6 dB. I'd like some 909 snares to make this transition more exciting, so I add a new instrument track and set it to drums, drum pads, 909 kit. I turn this track down to -6 dB. I sequence a 16th note roll at the end of the section. For the arrangement, I'm going to use a hybrid of traditional pop and dance arrangements. The dance element features the familiar intro, breakdown, and drop. However, I'm also using a sub-arrangement of verse, pre-chorus, and chorus. These are all 8 bars long, giving us a repeating 24-bar cycle. This begins on bar 9, which will be our verse. bar 17 is the pre-chorus. Bar 25 is the chorus, and this is where the track drops to. At bar 33, we begin the cycle again with the verse, and here the piano drops out to help things feel a touch stripped back. Bar 41 brings in the sustained strings for a pre-chorus. We get another chorus at bar 49 with the piano coming back in. At bar 57, we have a bridge section where the staccato strings come in. Here I use an automated multi-filter to low pass the piano back into the mix. This is followed by another chorus at bar 65, which is repeated without the strings for the final part of the track on bar 73. You can fork this project to make your own version of it using the link in the video description. Have fun!